So in the last video, we considered why we can't look to animals to figure out how to get out of the war of all against all, why democracy won't work. Of course, it was a very brief argument for the claim that democracy won't work. And then we noted what Hobbes thinks you need to do is pick a leader. So just to remind you of the flow here, here's the idea. We need to seek peace in order to get out of the war of all against all. In order to seek peace, we need to give up some of our rights, like I need to give up the right to kill you and you can give up the right to kill me. Remember, in the state of nature, you have the right of nature, which grants you the right to everything. So you need to be sort of content by with limited version of that right. So limit some of your right of nature in order for us to seek peace, in order for us to get along. And the best way to, give up some of your right of nature is to say, look, I give up some of mine. If you give up some of yours, we give up the same bits. And that is to make contracts. Now what we need to do is figure out a way to have those contracts be enforceable. And Hobbes is clear that he doesn't think we can make contracts and have them be enforceable. We won't find guidance by looking to animals. We can't use democracy. Instead, we need to pick a leader, and we need to give that leader the power to enforce contracts. And now we'll look at how Hobbes thinks you should pick a leader and how we should think about the leader's role in society. So here's the basic idea. Hobbes says, how do we pick a leader? Well, he thinks we're all born roughly equally. So ideally, we'd pick by lottery. You'd have everybody get a number and you make some announcement and say the winner is this person, and that person would become the king. That person would become the all-powerful ruler of society. But, says Hobbes, there's a problem here. And the problem is, by the time you're ready to rule, you've received an education. You've received an upbringing. And people get very different educations, very different upbringings. So we might need to pick the leader. In fact, he thinks we do need to pick the leader from the elite. He goes further and says, look, there'll be competition among the elite just for who should be the leader. And we don't really want that kind of competition. So what we should do, according to Hobbes, is just, have the leadership role be inherited from one elite to the next. So it's not going to be this person randomly chosen. Instead, what we're going to do is we're going to look at ordinary folk and the elites and choose the leader from among the elites. So we'll say this person is one of the elites. This person gets to be leader. So here's a few questions that will help us understand the leader's role in society. So how does picking a leader help? Well, the leader has unlimited rights and power. The leader does not give up the right of nature, and the leader is given sort of unlimited power to do whatever he or she wishes to. That ensures a few things. One is it ensures that only one conception of what's best is pursued. So, if this person just doesn't have any say in what the contract should be, and neither does anybody else except this person, then we only need one conception of what's best, because that person's conception is going to apply to everybody. So we avoid that kind of problem that Hobbes thinks would plague democracy. It also ensures that contracts are enforced. How does it do that? Well, the idea is that the leader stands outside the system of contracts. The leader has not given up the right of nature. The leader retains the right of nature. So the leader has the right to kill anybody the leader wants to kill. So the leader can say, look, ordinary person here, you violated a contract, I'm going to kill you, or I'm going to have someone kill you. Next question, can we change the leader? Is there any way, if the leader's doing a bad job, what can we do about it? Well, Hobbes says this. He says, only contracts that are enforceable allow us to escape the war of all against all. And anytime you challenge the leader, you put all contracts at risk, because there's no guarantee that you're going to have a smooth rebellion, that you're going to smoothly transition from one leader to someone else. So you may end up with no leader and be back in the war of all against all. You shouldn't risk restarting the war of all against all because that's the greatest danger to you, so you shouldn't challenge the leader. Now, there is an exception to this, and the exception is if the leader is doing such a bad job that you might as well be in the war of all against all. The society is so unstable and so inconsistent that you might say, look, the war of all against all wouldn't be any worse. If you're in a situation that's that bad, then it makes sense to challenge the leader because there's really no risk to restarting the war of all against all. You're kind of already there. But so long as the leader is making life at least a bit better than the nasty, brutish, and short situation that you have in the war of all against all, you shouldn't rebel because that risks going to a worse situation. Next question, what does the leader owe to her subjects? Well, the leader hasn't made any contracts. The leader is not a party to any contracts. The leader lays down the law for everybody else. But the leader is not subject to that law. The leader doesn't sort of shake your hand and say, I agree to give up my right to kill you if you agree to give up your right to kill me. The leader instead says, hey, you two over there, shake hands and agree not to kill each other. The leader is not party to any contracts. And remember, morality only arises when contracts are in place. So the leader is not subject to any moral constraints. There is no morality for the leader. It's impossible for the leader to behave in a way that's morally good or morally bad. So again, the point is all obligations begin with contracts. The leader is not involved in any contracts, so the leader doesn't owe anybody anything. Now, that being said, the leader will probably try and sort of do a decent job. Why will the leader probably try and do a decent job? Because, the idea goes, if the leader does an absolutely abysmal job, then people are likely to rebel. They're likely to say, I'd rather be in the war of all against all, or at least try and get out of it a different way than deal with you. And the leader, being a person, wants to avoid the war of all against all at all costs. So the leader wants to do at least a good enough job to avoid people rebelling. And again, that's just motivated out of self-interest. Okay, so here we have this kind of play out. This person says, I give up my right to harm you if you give up your right to harm me, talking not to the leader, but talking to other ordinary folk. And these other ordinary folk agree. And this person then says, I'll give up my right to this house if you give up your right to that car. So they're sort of like now having legal exchanges, and somebody might agree, and so on and so forth. And the leader stands over here and says, I don't give up any rights. But for practical reasons, I'm going to ensure that contracts are kept, because otherwise it will be the war of all against all over again. People are going to rebel. They won't have any incentive to obey me. And, I want them to obey me. I don't want them to rebel. I don't want to risk going back to the war of all against all. So the leader will declare things like, don't kill each other, don't steal, don't lie, and I'm going to punish you if you do. And the leader needs a police force, so the leader has kind of a large police force in place in order to be able to punish people who deviate from the rules. So here's a summary of the kind of flow that leads to this conclusion that we should have an all-powerful leader who stands outside the system of contracts. Premise 1, in the state of nature, we would be in a war of all against all, and that poses the greatest danger to any given person. Given the law of nature, I should try and avoid the greatest danger to me. Therefore, I should try and avoid the greatest danger to me. I can avoid the war of all against all only by giving up the right of nature, that right to do whatever I want, and I can give up the right of nature only through contracts. Therefore, I should give up the right of nature by making and keeping contracts. But I should only do it if others will do so, and others will do so, including me, only if there's a bludgeon, only if there's a power, only if there's someone who is likely to punish us if we deviate from contracts. So people, including me, will keep contracts only if there is an all-powerful leader to enforce them. So I should give up the right of nature, my liberty to do whatever I want, and support an all-powerful leader. That's a sort of rough sketch of the flow of the argumentation. Okay, we'll stop this video there and then rehearse some important ideas next time.